So a Summoner Skirmish ended up having 128 people, and man, that competition is something to take a look at. So we're going to be checking out the deck lists and which ones made the top 8, and it might just surprise you. All of that and more starting right now. So yeah, that's going to be the big thing. 128 people isn't anything to bat an eye at. In fact, it shows how big of a competition these skirmishes can get, and holy, that would be a dang long day. And that's why we're going to be taking a look at this list, because one, it's really interesting to see the ones who actually ended up making the top 8, but also, you know, when you have this big of a pool, especially before Houston, it can give you an inkling into what you might expect to see when you do end up competing in Houston. And I mean, of course, that's going to be over 1,000 people. I think they finally capped it out at around 1,250 or so. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what all that's going to be entailing for people as well. And we're going to be looking at that in a video later in the week, so look forward to that. But this is interesting because, I mean, we've had a big tournament as well with Runes and Rift, which managed to get 73 people. And we had competitors like Prismaticism sold out, and other really big competitors, Batsu and things of those. If I left out your name, even though you were in the top 8, it's mainly because I just don't know you. Sorry about that. Don't take it personal. But it was still a very high level of competition as well, and we're going to be taking a look at maybe some of those deck lists a little later in the week too. So yeah, this Summoner Skirmish is at Tap Games and had a total of 128 players. Again, that is just a long day for a skirmish. I mean, going in and playing so many rounds and then going into a top cut, that's a lot. Now, it is going to be really interesting to see how all of this ended up playing out. Now, first and foremost, it's going to be interesting to note that a Master Yi ended up actually taking first place. And this isn't something that we've necessarily seen a whole lot. I mean, if you even looked at like Vegas and things of that nature, they would maybe make a top cut every once in a while, but not necessarily anything outrageous or let alone a win. And this is a lot different than what we've seen in China as well, where in China you saw where it was like 40% Kaisa, 40% Yi, and then like 20% Viktor for some reason, and then everything else. And I say Viktor for some reason because he still is a very viable deck, and we already see like he ended up getting 4th place right here. That's a big deal as well, and we're going to be looking at that deck list. But, you know, it was really interesting to see how all of that ended up playing out here as well in China. And this is the difference here. There is a separation from what China is expecting and playing from what we are playing. We're even seeing, let alone a lot more jinxes in China as well in these city skirmishes kind of things that they are running. And you know, even Jinx doing decently well there. Whereas in America and in English in general, you're seeing nothing of that kind. So really interesting dynamics there and things to consider. But regardless, Yi hasn't necessarily made a ton of breaks into the top 8 necessarily. It's been a struggle. Kaisa's had better luck with that. But again, Kaisa is being about 40% of the field on average. And then otherwise, it's everything else actually has taken a step up and being pretty evenly spread, where we are seeing a pretty good number of sets, a good number of Annies and Yis and whatnot. Even Teemo is probably on the lower end, but still decently and higher than Ahri at that point. We haven't seen any Ahri in this meta, which is really interesting to consider. Either way, here we go with all of this. So, and it's got to be noted and really interesting that Annie has been able to take this meta by storm, so much so that I really think that this is the deck people are stepping into outside of Aurora. We haven't seen any Aurora, and it's kind of like been a hype deck where it has a really cool idea, a really fun mechanic, but if you hit, great, you're probably going to win. Keyword, probably. And if you don't, you're probably and pretty much going to lose. And so there's that caveat. And then let alone with Aurora's being, you know, $100, it has fallen to 70 just because of the popularity of the deck kind of simmering down a little bit. But still, it's not necessarily anything that is able to do incredibly well. And especially when going against Annie, you know, gosh, eats Aurora's lunch when it comes to playing against it, just with all the maneuverability, ways to protect itself, fight or flight, ride the wind with Vi. And so there's a lot going on that, you know, just really counters Aurora decks. Not only that, Kai'Sa can even do a decent job as well countering Aurora decks just by moving fast, being able to go ahead and get on bases, maintain card draw, and then preparing for the Dead Bloom Predator hit by pulling your units back to base so it cannot be played into a battlefield, and then you just go from there. But still, Dead Bloom Predator is still a very formidable foe and very difficult to take down. But, you're not going to necessarily be seeing yourself as, an Aurora player having much success, at least in this current state of the meta. So it's going to be interesting to see. But all the same, we saw at least in the 5th place, the first one being Kai'Sa here, then 6th and 7th as well. And we're going to be taking a look at some of those deck lists. And then top 16 is really interesting. Now, of course, not all of them were ending up getting their decks reported, and that should be noted as well. But this is really interesting too, and something that should be noted is that, yes, Kai'Sa is still having a good performance. That's not to put Kai'Sa down, saying that she is necessarily worse in any way, or that she is any less of a deck than what she has been so far in this meta. But what I am saying is that a lot of competitors are prepared for that matchup. Now, Kai'Sa is really good at being consistent. It punishes your opponent for not drawing well. If you happen to have a bad draw of a game, well, Kai'Sa is probably one of the best decks to then capitalize on that, and that's something to definitely keep in mind. Likewise, though, probably the number one deck that everyone is playtesting against is Kai'Sa. So you go into that matchup, you know exactly what to expect. Kai'Sa can still be explosive and still do a lot to devastate your board state, and it is definitely still going to be an earned win. But you know what to expect. Likewise, though, if you play something where you are doing like an Annie, a Teemo, or things of that nature, and you're going against a Kai'Sa player, well, they might not have seen that deck list as much, or let alone played against it all that much, and that could be a big difference maker there as well. And so, kind of an interesting way to wrap up all of these deck lists in this top competition here, and so really excited to see what these deck lists are. So yeah, with Master Yi, of course, his ability is going to be when a friendly unit defends alone, it gets +2 might. That alone can be a very big difference maker in making it very difficult for you to try to get over as the opponent going into Master Yi. Wow, it's tough. And especially in that late game, I mean, they can go ahead and play out a shielded Poro, essentially, and then they will be able to go ahead and make it pretty much a 5 might early game. And that, in this current state of the meta, can be very difficult to try to deal with. And you can find yourself getting a lot of early points with Master Yi, and then you go ahead and swing in a Dead Bloom Predator. You clear up the board with Master Yi and things of that nature, and you can just absolutely devastate things. Now, at the same time, sometimes you do walk yourself into a corner, which can be a little bit difficult, especially when you have to play Master Yi out in order to take a battlefield. More often than not, you are spending all of your runes to do so. And then right there, if you are going against a Kai'Sa, well, there's Falling Star and Master Yi is just dead. And that can be something very difficult because you do need to take the battlefield. You do need to try to maintain a good hold, but then you go ahead and overextend. Master Yi is an expensive champion in and of himself, and that can be so hard for you to try to move in. Likewise, Dead Bloom Predator at least has the Deflect, which is such a powerful ability, especially against Kai'Sa, and trying to find a way to get above that. You're mainly going to be finding ways of like Darius Hook or Darius and Cleave to go in at 10 to basically trade and hope that your opponent doesn't have a Deflect or an Unguard or things of that nature. Likewise, Master Yi probably has one of the most consistent gameplays out there in this current meta. You're able to go ahead and find pretty consistently a turn 2 or a turn 1 drop, essentially, and then just working your way up. And then especially when you go ahead and get to Dead Bloom Predator, it can be such a wall because not only is it going to be difficult attacking into at 10, just with Master Yi's legend ability and its might, but then you can also add things like Unguard and Discipline and things of that nature. And then you're going to be forcing your opponent to maintain or, to potentially pay a deflect cost at that point. I mean, Smokescreen is a great answer to Dead Bloom Predator, but when you go ahead and have to also recycle a rune in order to just target the Dead Bloom Predator, that can be something very difficult to have to do and can really slow down your game. Not only that, Kiana in there as well has Deflect, which can be very difficult to try to take down early game as well. Not only that, her ability is just super good, being able to then go ahead and when you conquer, you're able to channel a rune or draw. Now, both options are so incredibly good for Master Yi because you do want to maintain good card draw for sure, but a lot of your cards are already going to be replacing themselves. But on the flip side, channeling a rune, you could end up finding a Dead Bloom Predator so much quicker in that case, getting to the end game that you need in order to really take it to your opponent and seal out the game. Such a great and dynamic deck here. Now, one thing that's interesting too is Clockwork Keeper. He's a great one to drop early in the game. Of course, your optimal one is going to be the Stalwart Poro that has Shield +1, which is up to 5 in when you are defending with Master Yi's Legend ability. But Clockwork Keeper can be a great option as well, especially even mid to late game, because you can play out a 2-might unit, sure, but then you're able to then go ahead and recycle a rune to be able to draw a card, and that in and of itself can be a big game changer at the late game. Now, not only that, we've seen kind of a little bit of a shift where for Master Yi, there was a time where, you know, a lot of people were playtesting more of a heavy buff Master Yi kind of deck, which is a really interesting idea. And in that case, they've still taken a step back, but Pit Rookie is still, so maybe not the best thing to see in the early game, and that's perfectly fine. But if you go ahead and play Pit Rookie mid to late game, and you even happen to buff like a Kiana in this case, that already is going to be difficult enough to try to get over. And then even just that one buff is difficult. Then you go ahead and see it on Tasty Feyfolk or Dead Bloom Predator on top of that, man, it can get devastating fast. And it's so interesting how that 1 or 2 more might can make a big difference. It'll be interesting to see how much that impacts in this next meta with all the card upgrades that we're getting, but still, in this current meta, 1 might can make a big difference. Now, we've seen Tasty Feyfolk actually have a really big price increase because it is just such a good card. It never feels good to take out a Tasty Feyfolk because your opponent is going to be able to channel 2 runes and then also draw a card. That is one of the, if not the best, death knell ability in this game. I mean, come on. The next turn, you can immediately just go ahead and play out like a Dead Bloom Predator, a White Flame Protector. You can also even draw a card for that matter. And so a lot of that is going to be really interesting to see how all of that is going to end up playing into this. But Tasty Feyfolk can also even come in accelerated. So if there's a battlefield that's a little weak, they just barely happen to win the battle, and you can go ahead and accelerate out a Tasty Feyfolk and just send it right in and call it good there. Such a good deck. And then, of course, Dead Bloom Predator, the $99 card that people are running. Still a really great card. It's expensive for a reason. It's also extremely rare as an epic, and that is difficult. Same with White Flame Protector, and this competitor is running, 3 of each. Very expensive deck, all things considered. 2 Zhonya's Hourglasses. Now, keep in mind, this is the only gear that can be hidden, and that is a contradiction in the rules, but it is what it is. Now, Zhonya's Hourglass is just such a good card in general, just because the next time a friendly unit would die, kill this instead and recall that unit. Instead, you send it to base. This isn't a move. Now, that's going to be really good because if they do happen to get over a Dead Bloom Predator, if they do happen to get over a Kiana, well, she just goes back to base, and that alone can be really devastating, especially with Zhonya's Hourglass. Now, that's going to be the interesting part is when it comes in as a hidden card. I mean, it's already going to be very difficult to try to take down at that point. But then on top of that, you're going to be able to go ahead and, attack right back in and even continue to build up your board state. You could go ahead and get a Kiana back into base and then play out the Master Yi on the following turn and just take back both battlefields. Then not only that, your spell pool is just so incredibly powerful right now with Charm to be able to grab units that aren't necessarily safe and bring them into base. Defy, Unguard, Discipline, Rune Prison, Find Your Center, and then, of course, with that as well, your sideboard is going to be Sabotage. Now, interestingly enough, we have seen a lot of competitors that have actually mainboarded Sabotage, and you easily could here, taking out like 1 White Flame Protector, and like a pit rookie essentially, and you could fit sabotage, but definitely one white flame protector for a sabotage, because sometimes that can just be such a big card. Being able to go ahead and just let alone seeing your opponent's hand can be such good knowledge for you to have, and you're able to write that down so that you know when they are going ahead and what they could potentially be preparing for. Then Unyielding Spirit is one of the best cards against Kaisa, even Viktor as well, because Viktor's been running Singularities, Falling Comet, and things of that nature as well. Even Riptide Rex is an interesting option. Rune Prison to really help go ahead and stun a unit that can really help you hold the battlefield. And then Catalyst of Aeons to get that extra ramp if you need that little bit of speed to get into that late game that much quicker, though it can almost feel like it is really slowing down your gameplay if you happen to miss, or if you really need that top deck and you draw Catalyst of Aeons and you're just like, cool, I channeled 2 runes, pass my turn. That alone can also beat you in this case, and you got to be a little bit careful about that. And then as well, a Primal Strength to add +7 to a unit. So really interesting deck list. Glad it was able to get first. We haven't seen a lot of Master Yi able to get first, and so that is something that is very interesting to see in this current meta. Now, likewise, we have Annie. Now, biggest thing that Annie is able to do is at the end of your turn, ready 2 runes. And surprisingly, that is an incredibly powerful ability. And that was the thing, though, was Annie had a really good ability, sure, but you didn't necessarily think that it was all that powerful of a deck. I mean, mainly because Riot specifically said the Proving Grounds aren't necessarily powerful legends or meant to be meta competitive. And now 2 of the decks are actually the top competitors. Go figure. I get it, though. It's hard to sometimes predict that. Now, with that, though, Annie just has a really good legend ability in and of itself, but you got to be very careful because Annie is a very interesting deck that you almost have to finesse a little bit. You have to maintain the balance. You have to maintain card draw while also maintaining board presence, while also being able to maintain a wide pool of runes. If you go ahead and you recycle too many runes, well, then you shoot yourself in the foot and you're not able to necessarily do a lot of stuff mid to late game. Likewise, if you have two or less cards in your hand, well, then you have not a lot of utility, and you're going to be, again, shooting yourself in the foot because you can't necessarily build up your board or continue to get the points that you need. So it's a very difficult balance, but once you find and figure out that balance, and that balance even changes matchup to matchup. So if you're going a Kaisa, you're playing that differently than what you would with a Teemo or things of that nature. But when you find that balance, Annie has the magic, and she is scary when you go against that. So that's going to be the big thing. And Annie Stubborn, one of the best cards right here, because you can go ahead and grab a card from a spell card from your trash and add it back into your hand. So if you used a Falling Star, you can go ahead and grab that Falling Star, use it again. If you have a Ride the Wind that you need to be able to find that you've already used, well, you play Annie, you ride the wind. It's kind of crazy how fast you can go ahead and really utilize her ability. Now, it's not as good as Fizz in set 2, but still, it's really interesting to see what this card is able to do. Now, of course, early game, you're going to be trying to go ahead and play out a Traveling Merchant to try to get cards into the discard, trying to get the cards that you need in that nature. And then, of course, you're trying to get up to that so that when you get to 6 points, you can go Vi and Ride the Wind. You have to be a little careful sometimes with that because you need to be able to calculate if your opponent has a Defy or things of that nature. Now, again, that is only if you are going against a green deck, but otherwise, you just got to be a little bit mindful about how to go into this. You got to be, a little calculated on that. But again, if you can go ahead and get like 10 cards into your discard and you Vi and Ride the Wind, you've pretty much secured the game. Likewise, if you happen to get in a little bit of mid-game trouble as well, Vi Ride the Wind mid-game, while it might not seal up that end-game for you, it can get you out of trouble and manage to get you into a much more manageable place. Not only that, you got Sneaky Deckhand, which is one of the best starts. You can go ahead and turn 1, play out like a Traveling Merchant, and turn 2, play Sneaky Deckhand into a battlefield. You immediately get 2 points. Your opponent probably isn't going to be able to take both back and you could potentially be going up 3-1 at that point early game, and then you can immediately just keep going. Likewise, Kaisa's Survivor, the most expensive card in this deck, the one that makes it very difficult to try to compete with this deck because Kaisa's $90. It's needed because, again, when you conquer, you're able to draw a card, and that in and of itself is going to be such a big difference maker. It's why a budget version of Annie just doesn't necessarily work, because where you're playing Veins instead of Kaisa's, you're not drawing the cards on the conquers, and that can really slow you down. And so it sucks to see that, but that's how it is, unfortunately. And so 3 Kaisas is how it is. I have 2 currently right now, so I'm running 1 Vein and 2 Kaisas to balance that out. Still actually is very manageable, and sometimes even the extra might to attack in can be very helpful, but still, that card draw is such a game changer. And then likewise, you have the 3 Dariuses, which if you can go ahead and just play out 2 cards, he comes in ready, attacks him for 7, and it is really good. Now with that, you got your Cleaves to go ahead and get over those troubling battlefields that have a lot of might in them, which is really helpful. Now, interestingly enough, only 1 Gust. We've seen some variants in that where a lot of people run 3 Gusts, and if you go against a deck that just has a lot bigger units, especially early game, well, in that case, you're just going to go ahead and sub those out. It's a really easy side decking choice. Others have it kind of be situational, and others just don't play it at all. Now, that's completely understandable there, and I totally get that. The 1 Gust is really interesting, though, because it's like you more so want to see these early game. Mid to late game, it could still make an impact, but not necessarily all that great. Then, of course, one of the bread and butter cards of this deck is going to be Stacked Deck. Just such a good card. Being able to look at the top 3 of your main deck and put 1 into your hand and recycle the rest, put them at the bottom essentially, and that can be a really big difference maker. Falling Star to be able to clear out the big threats, Fight or Flight to say goodbye to those threats. Also, if you happen to play Dreaming Tree and you are then able to go ahead and when you target a unit, you draw a card, you can target your own unit and bring it back. That's why Flash is also such a good card, because you can grab up to 2 units, you target, Dreaming Tree draws you a card, and your units live to fight another day. That can be just such a big difference maker as well, and why Dreaming Tree is so powerful in Annie. And then likewise, Flash. Again, the reason why it is a $33 common is due to the fact that it is only found in the Proving Grounds. That's the difficult part. If you aren't able to get the Proving Grounds, or you don't have a good friend who's going to give you the 2 cards that you need, or the Annie deck for that matter, it's going to be a little bit difficult in that case, and something to definitely keep in mind. 1 Rebuke, though, is one ad that I absolutely really like. That can be something to really help seal up the game. Sometimes you just need to get that little extra to get into that 6-point range, and they have like even a Dead Bloom Predator or things of that nature, and that can be so difficult to respond to. And it sucks because Rebuke has a 2 power cost. That's difficult. But likewise, if you're able to get rid of that really big threat in a battlefield and take back the battlefield, that can be a big difference maker. Not only that, if they play a big unit and you have Rebuke and you have 2 runes at the ready, you still, of course, need to recycle the power cost of that, but you can get rid of that unit and your battlefield can still be yours to score another point, and that can even be the winning point as well, which makes Rebuke such an interesting choice. And again, Ride the Wind is going to be one of the best cards in the deck. Going to be able to go ahead and move a friendly unit and ready it. It's counterintuitive, and it is a 2-cost 1 power. How? Okay, that is such a great ability for a very cheap cost, and why purple is going to just be such a menace with all the cards that they end up having. Set 2 is going to be interesting, to say the least. I'm already excited enough for that. I'm trying to keep on topic, but man, purple is going to be so powerful this next go around. Then, of course, you have Arena's Greatest, Dreaming Tree, and Zon Warren. Zon Warren's when you conquer here, discard 1, then draw 1. And Arena's Greatest, you go ahead and get an additional point. You end up losing game 1. Cool, you're probably going Arena's Greatest when you're going first in game 2. If you win game 1, and you go Dreaming Tree game 2, and then after that you are looking pretty good going into Arena's Greatest if you happen to lose on Dreaming Tree. So really interesting. 2 more Gusts depending on the matchup again, 1 Falling Star just in case, another Rebuke, 2 Fading Memories, also great gear destruction as well, and 2 Veins in case you need that little extra hit. So again, just a really great anti-deck. Cool to be able to see in this case. And then we're going to be looking at the Viktor. Now, Viktor is really interesting because he's almost like a legend that doesn't necessarily have a great matchup into anything, but a good matchup into everything. I went and took my Viktor to my first skirmish just for fun, especially with my Viktor playmat and everything. I was like, you know what? Let's just go ahead and have some fun with that and take Viktor. And it was surprisingly good. I was really impressed with what it was able to do and accomplish. And we've been seeing a lot more things even start to break into the meta with Viktor as well. He's not anything to bat an eye at or to turn away from. In fact, you do have to be very careful when you take this deck seriously because it can be so dangerous. Because all of a sudden, even if you do a Cathian Rain and clear out a lot of the board, well, guess what? It's back. And just like that, in a turn, it'll come back stronger than ever, and you almost wasted a turn trying to go ahead and get that taken care of. So it'll be interesting to see what all of that is going to entail here. And again, the most expensive card here is going to be the Thousand Tail Watcher. Likewise, otherwise, this deck is pretty cheap. Now, of course, they're playing 3 Seal of Unities. You don't necessarily have to. I play 3 in mine, though I am going to be taking it down to 2 because it has been dead draws. It's more of a good thing if you have it, but if you don't, you don't necessarily miss it. So 2 is going to be probably where I'm at after play testing this deck. Otherwise, though, you do have a Blast Cone Fae, which is a hidden that you can end up doing. Really great job on being able to surprise your opponent, kind of the Teemo of the Viktor deck, and just minusing 2. That's going to be a spread of 4 immediately made for you at the battlefield that is being attacked. And that's going to be the biggest thing for Viktor is he can be very good at taking battlefields every single turn. And all you really need to do is be able to hold that battlefield about once, and then you should be able to ultimately win the game. So really fun dynamic there. And Blast Cone Fae, especially at 2, is really interesting. Then, of course, Daring Poro, Assault 3, really good. Soaring Scout, which is going to be helpful. Watchful Sentry at 1, again, just for that little bit of card draw. Faithful Manufactor, Vanguard Captain to create a lot of units, especially with the Legion ability. Sprite Mother, I like having Sprite Mother higher. Then again, I didn't get 4th, but, I love what Sprite Mother is able to do, especially just creating a 3-might unit. Not only that, and then having a readied 3 Sprite unit to attack into a battlefield can be a big difference maker as well. 2 Machine Evangel to be able to create 3 recruits on death, and 2 Thousand Tail Watchers for that in-game. Then, of course, we got Cold of the Week, also just such a good card depending on the matchup. Really, the only bad matchup for that could be Viktor Mirror Match or Darius as well, just because they have so many units. It's not going to do anything. Hidden Blade, though, you are more likely going to be targeting your own units to maintain card draw, though late game, it can be really good to being able to do that. And I get what he did there. Instead of 3 Sprite Mothers, he's doing 1 Sprite Mother and 2 Sprite Calls because it can also be hidden. That is a really good ability in and of itself as well. 2 Consults of the Past to draw, 1 Falling Comet, that can be very surprising. Also, no power cost as well. So you're able to keep your runes out. 1 Imperial Decree. I do more Imperial Decrees than Grand Stratagems because, yes, it is a great finisher card, but I just need that little bit more. And Divine Judgment, more importantly, is going to be such a interesting addition to this as well. Just because each player chooses 2 units, 2 gear, 2 runes, and 2 cards in their hand, and you recycle the rest. And already, Viktor is probably not going to have a lot of cards in hand. And so it's going to be interesting to see what that is able to do. But again, I don't necessarily know how I feel about Divine Judgment. It doesn't necessarily feel great because, again, your opponent is going to be immediately going up to 4 runes at the start of their turn. The card card loss can be a very devastating thing. But likewise, you can almost prepare for that a little bit, and be ready to just continue to keep swinging. But still, it can shut some decks down, and that can be a big difference maker. Singularity is also just such a good card. You got to be careful against like the Lee Sens, the sets, and things of that nature, because they already run the unyielding spirit against like Kaisa. It's already sided for. So with Viktor, you're probably going to get that done on you. And if so, it's probably going to be a lost cause at that point. But still, I mean, that's why you also run the Falling Comet, because it can really surprise your opponent, especially since it is an action and can be played in showdowns. Now, likewise, Candlelit Sanctum, great card. Doesn't necessarily help out your opponent very much, but can really help you as well. Trifarian War Camp, great for you. And Vilema's Lair, we've been seeing this a lot more. Makes it to where units can't move from here to base. That can really hurt Annie decks. That can really hurt Kaisas and things of that nature. Even Set, for example, though they can sometimes get some good luck with ganking or things of that nature as well, which is really interesting to consider there. Likewise, one Facebreaker, that could be something to really lock in on the end game. You hide it. You go ahead and stun the enemy unit attacking in. You stun your own unit. If they can't get over the might that is in your battlefield otherwise, then they just bounce back to base. And again, sometimes you just need that 1 or 2 times that you hold a battlefield to be able to win the game with Viktor. Now, Siphon Power, really good. Interesting that it's only a 1 of 2 Shins, because, I mean, it comes in with shield +2 and tank and can be played at reaction speed. Keep in mind, one mistake I've seen a lot with Shin is that people think that you can play it when you attack into a battlefield, and you can't. You need to be, it says right there, it needs to be played into a battlefield you control. You do not control a battlefield when you attack into it. You do, though, when you defend it. 2 Sprite Mothers, again, for the aggro, 1 Falling Comet, and another Imperial Decree. So all in all, though, just a really good deck list, and something really interesting to be able to see here as well. Now, I really do like what we were able to have here. And we'll look at the Kaisa and then probably call this video good, because Kaisa is just a very kind of generic one here in and of itself. Now, we are seeing Kaisa at 5th place, and really interesting to see. 1 Daughter of the Void. Now, of course, that is going to mean that you go ahead and you're able to use her as a power cost for spells only. So keep that in mind. And then Kaisa Survivor, you're only running 1 in this case, and normally that's the nice part. That's going to be your expensive thing, and then, of course, 3,000 Tail Watchers. Otherwise, the deck outside of a Cathine Rain and Time Warp, I don't get why people run both, but I mean, this deck got 5th place, so definitely can see that. But I hate running 2 of each, just because sometimes it does bog down your hand. But in this case, yeah, it ended up really working out for them well. 2 Pouty Poros, 3 Ravenbloom Student, 3 Watchful Sentries, 2 Lecturing Yordles for the card draw and tank ability. That's really good. 3 Noxus Hopefuls. The Legion for 2 is just so good. Darius to come out swinging. 3,000 Tail Watchers for that endgame. 3 Cleave, 3 Hextech Rays, 3 Retreats, 3 Stupefies, Falling Star, Smokescreen, 2 Acathian Rains, Time Warps, all the general stuff. Again, if you're running the Time Warps, you need to run 3 Retreats, because you need that Channeled Rune to help you get up to 10. If you don't, you're probably never going to have enough runes for Time Warp, and that can really be to your detriment. Likewise, you have Orb of Regret, which is really interesting to go ahead and give a unit -1, only running 1 though, which is interesting. Another Smokescreen definitely makes sense. A 3rd Lecturing Yordle, 2 Void Seekers, Thermo Beams to destroy the gears, whether that be for Set, but more importantly, the Auroras, and a Megamech. All in all, for a total of $629 of this deck at current prices. So again, this isn't necessarily anything mind-blowing here. Very standard Kaisa deck. The Time Warps and the Acathian Rains are definitely good. I do prefer running with 2 Acathian Rains and no Time Warps in my deck in particular. But, I mean, still, Kaisa is definitely one to watch out for. Can be a very good card here to make a big difference. And it's still not anything to bat an eye at. You're going to be still seeing a lot of Kaisas. It is the best deck in this meta. But likewise, I think the meta is going to be adjusting. And until the Kaisa players really start figuring out how to best play into all of these matchups, you know, we're going to see Kai'Sa kind of fall back a little bit until the skill level gets back up to where it needs to be with Kai'Sa players. Not to say that they don't necessarily know, but when the decks that you're going against, if you're playing a Annie, you know, it's like, cool, well, I mainly need to prepare for going against Kai'Sa. Otherwise, you know, I'm kind of okay. I can play against other decks, but I'm kind of okay. Cool. You know, if you play Set, kind of need to prepare for maybe Master Yi and Kai'Sa, but otherwise you're kind of okay, you know, but Kai'Sa, you have to now know everything, including your mirror match, which can be such a grind, and very well might be why we saw these Kai'Sas take that step back and not necessarily win a ton of tournaments here in America and in English as a whole just yet. So I'm really curious to see how all of that is going to continue to impact. But guys, this is really interesting to see. And will we see something like this when going into Houston? Time will tell. It's this weekend, and that is going to be exciting. And so with that being said, guys, we are going to end it there. Thank you so much for being here. So excited to be able to make these videos. What decks are you looking to build, or what would be your ideal build if you could get your hands on the cards? Go ahead and let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, guys, have a good one.